other comparable railroad companies in the region.
Right.
That ultimately led to the strike and 3 days of negotiations. After that, they settled. We don't actually know the specific details, but what has been shared by the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, that's the union, they said that the agreement was 7 years long, includes a pay increase that raised hourly wages to over $50 an hour, and they also got retroactive pay and a signing bonus.
The MTA says the Long Island Railroad unions are asking for more than what their colleagues across the river got.
Yeah.
And they're warning that there's a chance that all of our fares could be impacted if they agree to those high salaries. It could throw the MTA's financial planning out of whack. Instead of that 4% biannual fare increase we see now, could be as much as 5 or 6%.
Wow.
But really, the reason the rubber's hitting the road right now, what's recently changed, is these parties have been negotiating for a while. There was federal mediation until August, when the federal mediator basically said these two sides are at an impasse. They cannot come to any agreement. We're done with this. So right now, the unions are voting on whether to go on strike. We'll know more about that on Monday. And if enough members approve it, by Thursday, train service on the Long Island Railroad could be halted.
Clayton, help us understand here, because I thought in New York State, certain public workers just aren't allowed to go on strike, right? This is the Taylor Law. Does that not apply to LIRR workers?
Right. Let's just give some background on the Taylor Law.
Yeah.
And it's why you don't see teacher strikes or New York City subway strikes in New York. And it's not because we have not weak unions.
Yeah,
That's because in the 60s they passed this law named after George Taylor, this labor researcher. It was so unpopular and politically toxic that no governor wanted to put their name on it.
Wow.
But it essentially says public sector unions can't go on strike, but they get to preserve the terms of their contract after it expires until they come to a new one.
Okay.
So it's why subway strikes are technically illegal. Why in 2005, when Roger Toussaint, who was the head of the Transit Workers Union, he went to jail for leading a strike. That doesn't apply to the LIRR and Metro North because they're regulated under the Federal Railway Act, which supersedes it, right? So they get kind of play by a different set of rules, which is really their bargaining chip, their leverage here. And the last time LIRR had a significant strike was back in '87, shut down service for 11 days. Then President Reagan had to come in, kind of bring in an emergency board and diffuse the whole situation. It's unclear if Trump would do the same thing this time around.
Yeah. All right, Stephen, I'm really curious to hear what regular folks are saying about this. You spoke to some riders, right? What are they saying about it?
Yeah, I was out earlier this week. At that point, a lot of folks hadn't really heard about the strike, maybe some rumblings. Several people said they would just work from home. They hoped to be resolved quickly like the NJ Transit strike was. But not everyone can work from home. I met Sharon Hirsch. She owns a shop called Balloon Saloon.
Okay.
You can guess what she sells. And she says there's just no way she can afford to drive in and park, the extra time that comes with that. Here's what she said about a potential strike and a warning. She uses an expletive to express herself.
I would not come into the city because I'm not going to sit in traffic for 3 hours and then pay $100 to park my car or get a $100 ticket on the street. So basically, you could bleak me out.
She says she doesn't know who's going to run the balloon shop if there are no trains.
Right.
And the Balloon Saloon, not only a really valued Manhattan business.
Sure.
Great name.
Yeah.
Great name, Balloon Saloon.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's safe to say if the LIRR goes on strike, that business, a lot of others, going to be deflated.
But jokes aside, though, commuting is really going to be a real challenge. And that's because it's so different from the New Jersey Transit strikes. Those commuters could at least take the PATH train, take a cab or ferry. If they want to spend some more money, they could even take the Amtrak trains.
Sure.
Here's LIRR President Rob Free pointing to working from home as maybe one of the main options for riders affected from this potential strike.
People have other options. We don't want to explore those options. We don't want to strike. They have to realize they need to come to the table and make concessions.
So now we have to wait and see if the two parties will actually come back to the negotiation table and maybe prevent this from happening altogether.
Okay. Next up here, I'm really curious about this one just based on previous conversations we've had on the way. The state controller released a report earlier this week that audited the MTA subway service over the last year. What are the biggest takeaways?
They took a look at the data and found, from 2024 to the first half of this year, similar to a common thread in our reporting, that there's aging infrastructure, old train cars, signal systems and tracks. It's really worsening service for riders. So if you just look at delays caused by infrastructure and equipment failures, they're contributing now to a greater percentage of total delays. Then there are major incidents. That's an incident that causes 50 or more delays. those have spiked so far this year as, quote, subway car problems continue to plague the system. So what that means is, if you look at the data, there were 27 major incidents due to old subway cars in the first half of 2024. In the first half of this year, major incidents from busted cars have actually tripled, or at least nearly tripled. So the state comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, is saying that the MTA must address signal issues and those subway cars to really minimize delays and improve the experience for riders.
I think a couple points to make here. It's not just subway cars; it's infrastructure and equipment writ large that's causing a lot of problems for the MTA lately, and it's a lot of the aging infrastructure that they're trying to fix. Last week we were first to report on MTA data that showed June and July. The subways had the worst June and July this year that they've had since 2018, when service was really bad. You might not have noticed it as much in terms of big crowds and photos because we have more than like 1.5 million fewer riders per day. But anyone who took the system, especially the lettered lines, saw and experienced regular delays. We had those big outages in July around West 4th that kind of trickled throughout the system. But the data really shows signals, car breakdowns, electrical problems continued and repeatedly affected riders and commutes across June and July. And the MTA has really pushed back against that reporting, saying, hey, we really improved things in August. But this data really just put some numbers behind what riders already know, like, hey, we're seeing some concerning problems. Now, on the other side of that, the MTA had just passed this 5-year capital plan this year to really invest in all these underlying systems that you can't see. We've covered it extensively at this newsroom. But a part of that is, to Ramsey's point, part of this capital plan is replacing old subway cars. A third of the subway cars in the city are more than 40 years old. They're jalopies, they're clunkers, they're beaters. Imagine driving around, you drive a motorcycle, that thing's not 40 years old.
Forget about it. Yeah, no, it wouldn't work for a second. Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Vintage is cool, though.
And the comptroller is warning, though, that, okay, there's all these new investments, but they have to do it on time and on budget.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, there was an audit that found, another audit, that basically the current modernization signal projects, those are behind schedule. You can't have that. So the longer that goes, the longer riders will have to experience some pain commuting around the city.
Okay, we're going to switch some gears here. East Harlem residents are calling for an abandoned station dating back to the 19th century to be integrated into a new station as part of the 2nd Avenue subway extension project. Ramsey, what's going on?
Yeah, basically in the basement of the lobby of the Metro North station in Harlem, 125th Street, there's this abandoned old station that dates back to the late 19th century.
Cool.
That's before there was the elevated Park Avenue viaduct, and when they closed it up, it became this basement that nobody ever touched. So now local leaders and advocates want to use it for the new 2nd Avenue subway extension project. At the same intersection, there will be a new Q-Line subway station. They're saying, why not make this Grand Central Station uptown that houses all the train services under one roof? You can really connect from one to the other without having to leave the station. The MTA has looked at the design proposal and said it isn't feasible, so I guess we have to wait and see.
Well, thanks to WNYC's Ramsey Khalife and Stephen Nesson and editor Clayton Guzzi. You can stay in the know on all things transit or ask a question of your own by signing up for a weekly newsletter at gothamist.com/on-the-way. My friends, as always, it's been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
It's WNYC. Marketplace is up next. Besides healthcare, leisure and hospitality are the only sectors seeing meaningful employment growth.
You also have a lot of demand for chefs and for cooks, and especially those where it's more of a scratch kitchen.
A look at how the bar and restaurant industry is faring in this economy. That's coming up next on Marketplace. We'll be back with all things considered at 7 tonight. Right now, 76 degrees here in Lower Manhattan. We're going to see temperatures fall into the low 60s overnight. Tomorrow, it's going to stay sunny, high around 78 in the afternoon. Much of the same on Saturday with highs in the upper 70s, a little bit warmer by Sunday, high around 82, and it's going to be sunny throughout the weekend. WNYC at 6:30.
WNYC receives support from the 2025 Brooklyn Book Festival. September 21st, hundreds of authors and publishers gather in downtown Brooklyn, plus a Children's Day on September 20th. Open to all. More at brooklynbookfestival.org.
This is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Yubico, makers of the YubiKey. YubiKey helps protect important digital applications and services. YubiKey, still undefeated, the original passkey. More at yubico.com.
Today's program brought to you by The Rock and the hard place between which the Federal Reserve now finds itself. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Viking, dedicated to bringing travelers to the heart of each destination with small ship, river, ocean, and expedition voyages, offering cultural enrichment and immersive experiences. Discover more at Viking.com. And by Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at ProgressiveCommercial.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Risdall. It is Thursday today, the 11th of September. Good as always to have you along, everybody. That rock and the hard place betwixt which the central bank now is actually codified in law, the Full Employment and Balanced Growth Act of 1978 by name. It says in relevant part that it shall be the economic policy of the United States to have, among other things, price stability and full employment. That, as you know, has come through the years to be known as the Federal Reserve's dual mandate. They got to do both things. And here we find ourselves, mid to late 2025, with the opposing sides of that mandate in some degree of tension. The labor market, as we know, is slowing, and inflation, the latest read of which we got this morning with the August Consumer Price Index, is nudging higher, 2.9% over this time last year. So, Marketplace's Samantha Fields reports now on what the Fed is seeing as it settles in between that rock and that hard place.
Nothing about the latest inflation or jobs numbers is all that bad. Inflation is right around 3%, and the unemployment rate is a little over 4%.
But here's the problem. It's not the level of these variables, it's the trend. They are moving in the wrong direction.
And Kevin Jakes, a former economist at the Treasury Department, says the Fed has one tool to try to fix that problem: interest rates. If they decide to cut rates,
inflation would go up, but unemployment would go down.
And if they decide to leave rates high, that could keep inflation down, but might push unemployment up. Ann Owen at Hamilton College says that creates a dilemma for the Fed.
Because they can lower rates to improve labor market conditions, or they can choose not to lower rates to keep downward pressure on inflation.
But they can't do both. For the last couple of years, she says the Fed's focus has clearly been inflation. It had gotten high and employment had stayed solid, so the priority was clear. But
the predictions about the labor market and the information coming from the labor market is screaming a lot louder than inflation right now.
So the Fed's focus might shift to the other half of its dual mandate, maximum employment. Bill English at the Yale School of Management says it's not as clear-cut as it was a couple of years ago what to prioritize, though, because inflation isn't exactly where the Fed wants it to be either.
They continue to have to trade off the outlook for inflation and the outlook for employment, and also the risks to those things. And that's hard to get right.
Still, he says that's what they're trying to do. I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
Wall Street today, in contrast to the Fed and the jam it is in, traders do seem to think they are sitting pretty. We will have the details when we do the numbers. There aren't all that many bright spots in the U.S. labor market at this particular moment, but not many does not mean none. Healthcare jobs are growing, which tracks America's getting older, and we all still get sick no matter how the rest of the economy is doing. A bit more surprising, perhaps, is that the coffee shop or the pizza place down the street probably still has a help wanted sign in the window. Employment at food services and drinking places grew by about 17,000 June to August, so says the BLS. And overall, the restaurant industry's up 120,000 jobs year over year. Marketplace's Matt Levin reports.
The Alston is a new steakhouse in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. It opened in May. As you'd expect for a fancy steakhouse in a fancy part of town that also offers something called tableside duck press, the steak ain't cheap.
It ranges from, high 50s all the way into, if you're going into some of the real specialty Wagyus, $300-400.
Scott Weiner is part of the ownership group for the Alston. The tableside duck press thing is $225, if you're wondering. If you think with a weakening job market and sticky inflation and all this general economic agita out there, consumers may not have much of an appetite for $100 steak, you'd be wrong. Weekend reservations at the Alston are booked out weeks in advance.
If you think about the income gap, right, it tells me that the people that have money have a lot of it and they're spending it.
Nationally, restaurant spending is up almost 6% over the last year. While higher-income foodies are still splurging on fine dining, middle-income consumers don't want to give up one of the indulgences they can still afford. Chad Moutre is an economist at the National Restaurant Association.
You hear that people might be not taking vacations, they might not be going out and making those big purchases, but people still want to go out to eat.
You already canceled that trip to the Bahamas, no need to cancel the trip to Chili's. Return to office mandates and higher grocery costs have also likely lured more customers away from their ovens and air fryers at home. Moutre says a surprisingly steady flow of diners is keeping restaurant hiring relatively strong.
The toughest positions to hire are, number one, managers, right? But you also have a lot of demand for chefs and for cooks, and especially those where it's more of a scratch kitchen.
Job postings for food service managers and food prep workers were up by 26,000 this summer compared to last, according to the labor data company Lightcast. Some of those positions, though, they may be open only because they used to be filled by undocumented immigrants. Ron Hetrick is an economist with Lightcast.
People were like, look, I can't come to work because I'm afraid that I might, be sent out of the country. So they just didn't show up.
Despite those deportation fears, restaurants are having an easier time filling positions than they did during that whole post-pandemic Great Resignation era. Chicago restaurateur Scott Weiner says he filled 150 positions for the opening of the Alston pretty quickly. Applications came in from everywhere.
Honestly, all walks of life. We've had founders of startups that have come in looking for jobs or just, trying to see what you might have.
Tech is one of those industries that's not hiring so much at the moment. I'm Matt Levin for Marketplace.
The great thing about government economic data is that you can drill way down should you be so inclined. And we, of course, are. Inflation's running 2.9%. As I said, that's year on year. The category that's up the most since last year, energy services. Electricity up 6.2%. Utility delivered natural gas up 13.8%. Marketplace's Daniel Ackerman is on that one.
One reason electricity costs so much right now, the economy just needs more of it.
Demand is actually skyrocketing all over the place.
Ellen Wald of the Atlantic Council says that's a new trend in the past couple of years.
It used to be that electricity demand was actually fairly consistent. It didn't really go up all that much.
Now, though, there's a push to electrify machines that burn fossil fuels, like cars and furnaces.
And then you have the data centers.
AI firms are tripping over themselves to build them. Their copious energy needs are usually met by electric utilities, says Amy Myers-Jaffe of New York University.
They make these investments in new generation capacity and wires, and they pass that on to their ratepayers.
Ratepayers, including you and me. Jaffe says growing exports of natural gas are also raising prices for domestic consumers. And that is happening just as utilities are spending more in the wake of climate disasters, says Arvind Ravikumar at the University of Texas at Austin.
With hurricanes that have been devastating in Houston, there's been discussions of burying power lines, which is expensive.
Even in places not recovering from disaster, Ravikumar says wear and tear is starting to show in electricity distribution systems.
These are the poles, the wires, the substations that supply electricity to our homes.
He says for decades, many utilities have focused on building new infrastructure. That's left a lot of deferred maintenance on what's already there.
Upgrading and maintaining of sort of local distribution systems have needed to be done for a long time. We have just postponed the problem and kicked the can down the road.
Ravikumar says now utilities can't do that anymore, and we are going to keep feeling it in our energy bills. I'm Daniel Ackerman for Marketplace.
There's been, as you know, a complete 180 from the Biden administration to the Trump in climate change policy. As Daniel Ackerman was just telling us, the energy we need to power this economy is only going to get more expensive, and we are going to need a whole lot more of it. That's the national story. Things do look a little different, though, when you get down to the state and city level. Exhibit A for us today, Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is starting up something called a sustainable energy utility that'll let locals opt into city-owned microgrids. Missy Stultz is the Director of Sustainability and Innovation for the city, also one of the architects behind that program. Thanks for coming on the program.
Oh, Kai, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
For those perhaps unfamiliar, what is a microgrid?
Yeah, well, micro, so like a mini little grid, if you will. Simplest way to think about this, imagine 2 or 3 houses connected together, generating their own power, sharing it over small scale distribution lines like what you see outside. So you got your generation, you got some batteries, and you're sharing that power across property lines.
The grids might be micro. The task, however, is not. Why is the city doing this?
Well, I think another question, too, is why not? We're at a moment in time where we've got a culmination of issues we're trying to solve for. We've got here in Ann Arbor a pretty unreliable grid. We've got global climate change happening, and we're feeling the impacts here. We also have an affordability crisis, right? Energy prices are going up significantly. Well, reliability, resilience from a climate perspective, affordability, and clean can all be solved if you generate energy kind of where you use it, as opposed to moving it across lots of long distance poles and wires. So we just kind of challenged the current energy model and said, what if we think about this a little bit differently?
This is an infrastructure investment on the part of the city. Cities, as we know, are strapped. You got to finance this thing and figure out how to pay for it, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, right? Sure we do, but we have to
you don't seem
things all the
troubled,
time.
right? Yeah.
No. I mean, one, we're already invested in our energy systems, right? We know we need a lot of energy, and guess what? We're going to use more energy as we have advancements in more data centers, and we're using more kind of AI of everything that's advancing. So we're going to have to make investments in energy. It's just a critical part of our life. Well, the good news is cities can get dollars generally for cheaper than private market companies can, and because renewables are more affordable. And no matter what policies we put in place, like that truth is just here. And so we can actually bypass a lot of the quagmires of the existing energy system and do it in a financially viable way by generating locally.
I was checking out your CV before we got on the phone, as one does. You have a PhD in urban resilience, right?
Oh, I do. It's so wonky.
Okay. Well, but it's very, appropriate to the subject at hand. But I'm going to ask you the bigger picture question beyond just Ann Arbor, right? Even though you had 80% approval of this move within the city, Ann Arbor's a college town. It's blue. Talk to me about scaling this thing to solve the national problem that we have.
Yeah, well, let me also give just a little bit of background that the sustainable energy utility is only authorized to generate from renewable energy. It cannot touch any fossil system. That was in the vote. It also is supplemental. So we are not trying to take over our existing infrastructure. Right. There's a lot of kind of nuance that each individual community has to look at. But before we got here, my team ran solar programs, and we saw 1,000% growth in solar adoption just through some of the incentive programs that we've run here. That's transferable. That's scalable no matter where you are in the U.S. or even in the world. So you can't take everything I'm doing and just do it in fill in the blank, Lewis, Delaware. But what you can do is figure out what works in Lewis, Delaware, and take the models and apply them in your place. So this is transferable, just not A/B. It might be a more circuitous route.
Let me ask you what is a political question. And look, if you want to duck it, since you're a city official, I guess I'll understand. But this is not a moment at the federal level where what you are trying to do is treated with great favor. And I guess I wonder how you think about that, or don't you?
Oh, no, I would reframe it to say nothing about what I do has ever been fully supported, right? Our entire systems are set up to move towards extraction. They are not set up to be regenerative and in relation with our natural systems. Like, that's just not how we've been for the last fill in the blank decades. And Kai, what's the alternative? I mean, literally, what is the alternative? Is it that I'm going to continue with runaway climate change impacts that are flooding my communities, causing asthma attacks, wildfire smoke that's choking young lungs? Like, that's just not a viable alternative. And so we say in Ann Arbor on my team, light shines brightest in the dark. And boy, is it a dark moment. But guess what? Man. We're going to shine, right? We're going to shine. So game on.
Missy Stultz, she's the Director of Sustainability, also in Innovation for the City of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Missy, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks, Kai.
Coming up.
I only charge $125 an hour for my house, so it is definitely just a side hustle.
All the world's a stage, even your house. But first, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 617 points today, just over 1 1/3%, 46,108 for the blue chips. The Nasdaq added 157 points, about 0.7%, 22,043. The S&P 500 up 55, almost 0.9%, 65,87. Hey, how about some more CPI, huh? Food at home up 0.6%, the biggest monthly jump in more than 3 years. Fruit and vegetables up 1.6%. Tomatoes, quick, fruit or vegetable, huh? Up 4.5%. Also this morning, grocer Kroger raised its sales and profit forecast for the year. Shares up 0.3% today. Another big jump in the price of used cars and trucks, 1% on the nose in August, 6% over 12 months if you happen to be in the market. Used car retailer Carvana slipped 3%. Bonds rose, yield on the 10-year T-note down 4.02%. It was below 4 at one point during the session. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Numbers is supported by Odoo.com, your entire business on one platform. Marketplace is supported by Avalara, providing businesses with cloud-based tools and managed services for property tax compliance. From filing returns to tracking assessments, Avalara can help. Learn more at avalara.com/propertytax. And by the University of Illinois' Geese College of Business, offering a completely online MBA program that learners can take at their own pace while engaging with classmates around the globe. Learn more at onlinemba.illinois.edu. And by the United States Postal Service, offering postage stamps for purchase at checkout at over 40,000 participating supermarkets and drugstores, and at wholesale clubs Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club, and BJ's.
Hi, this is Steve Inskeep with NPR News. I've just come from the Morning Edition meeting where we were posing questions about the killing of Charlie Kirk. What do his life and death say about political speech, political violence, and the state of this country? We'll try for answers and have an update on the investigation on the next Morning Edition from NPR News.
Weekday mornings on WNYC.
WNYC is supported by the New York Committee for Occupational Safety and Health. 9/11 rescue, recovery, and cleanup workers may be eligible for medical treatment due to exposure to dust and other toxins. More at cdc.gov/WTC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. In the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, the Labor Department says overall cost of living rose nearly 3% for the 12 months ending in August. We're going to get an inflation report and much more at 7 o'clock. Stay with us.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. This is none of my business, of course, but what is your personal risk tolerance? Financially, I mean. I'm asking because the Trump administration wants to make it easier for you to be more risk on in your retirement accounts, specifically to give you the chance to invest in private equity. Think, say, hedge funds that buy companies, take them private, and usually turn them around for a quick profit. Usually there was doing a lot of work because while the rewards can be higher in those kinds of investments, so too can the risks, as Marketplace's Nova Safo explains.
Investors have poured in some $24 trillion into private equity markets, which have three main components. Steve Kaplan, professor of entrepreneurship and finance at the University of Chicago, says the first is venture capital firms which invest in startups.
Then another group would be companies that are bought by private equity firms, call them in buyouts.
Like this summer when private equity firm Sycamore Partners bought out Walgreens. The third component in private markets is credit.
The buyouts in particular get funded not by banks any longer, but by private credit funds,
which pool investor resources and make loans. It's all about high risk, high reward. A startup could fail or succeed spectacularly. A buyout could turn a company around, or it could go bankrupt. Managers who run private funds have been pushing to open up access to employer-sponsored accounts, namely 401ks. The Biden administration was not sold. The Trump administration is listening. Josh Lerner is a private markets researcher at Harvard Business School.
They've undertaken a series of steps that make it easier for institutions to offer 401k holders the ability to invest in private equity.
Last month, the president ordered the Labor Department and other agencies to review their policies. Soon after, the Labor Department rescinded a Biden-era effort to limit the practice. But even if the Trump administration is ultimately successful in lowering barriers, Lerner is skeptical employers and 401k administrators will race into private equity markets.
Traditionally, one of the big fears has been that of legal liability.
For instance, they're worried workers will sue over the higher fees charged by private funds, which could eat away at lifetime gains. Private funds are also complex instruments, difficult to understand even for professionals. Add to that concerns about the quality of some of the underlying assets in private equity. Lenore Palladino is an associate professor of economics and public policy at the University of Massachusetts.
Private equity firms have had a harder time selling off the companies that they had purchased when the time that they want to hold that company is up.
And they need to sell to pay back previous investors.
And so they're essentially looking for a fresh pot of money for them to use in their deal making.
The $12 trillion in assets sitting in 401ks and other employer-sponsored accounts look awfully fresh. Palladino worries everyday investors could end up holding the bag for past investments that have not panned out.
It's really clear that, the smart money is already getting out, and so now it's time to bring in the dumb money.
But Steve Kaplan at the University of Chicago says it's in the interests of big money managers who live on the fees associated with running private funds to figure out a way to make those investments attractive to 401k plan administrators.
You're protected by the fact that the intermediaries, let's say it's a BlackRock, have an incentive to provide product that is good for investors, because if they get it right, then they get more money and make more money over time.
There are already some moves in this direction. In May, retirement services provider Empower announced new private investment trusts on offer. But individuals would have to meet with an advisor first before adding them to their 401ks. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
Here's one more line item from today's Consumer Price Index. The cost of shelter was up 0.4% last month. Once again, the biggest single factor driving inflation higher. It makes sense given how big that expense is compared to all the other things that people buy. There are ways to offset the cost of housing, though, if you're creative, maybe with a sense of adventure. Here's today's installment of our series, Adventures in Housing.
My name is Jill Narstead, and I live in Chicago, Illinois. I have a little side hustle renting my home that we live in out to productions here in Chicago. I have my home listed on an app called Peerspace that producers look through. We, text back and forth through the app, and then I clear out my family and my dog, and they come in, and the first thing I say when the production team walks in is, make yourself at home. A thing they love about my house is that it's lived in. It looks like a gingerbread house. It's got a little peaked roof. I've been told there's a lot of different nooks and crannies that you can photograph or film in. So I've had several repeat customers. One of them is social media campaigns for a dog food dispenser. And then another one that I've had several times is a jewelry company that I've never heard of, Tuna. a giant printer company like your desktop printer. We're very popular with student films because I'm a bleeding heart, and they'll shoot one day and rent the house for one day and then call me desperately needing the next day, to which I'll say yes, and then they'll call me desperately needing just one more day. It's just been really fun, like pulling back the curtain and seeing so much that goes into production. Whole houses can go for, up to $500 an hour. I only charge $125 an hour for my house. So it is definitely just a side hustle. One of my favorite things about renting my house out is the people that come in. I just met a new neighbor recently, and she was like, what was going on at your house the other day? And I explained to her, and she looked at me and she was like, you're like the fun mom. And I was like, dang, I am. But it's like, boy, can life get mundane? And it's something for people to talk about. And I love that for them and for me.
Dang, I am. That was Jill Narstedt giving her neighbors in Chicago something to talk about. We want you to talk about your adventure in housing. You can do it at marketplace.org.
Marketplace is supported by Solidigm. Today's AI ambitions require a different approach to storage. Solidigm offers solid-state storage solutions optimized for AI with higher capacities, greater speed, and energy efficiency. StorageForAI.com. And by Odoo, dedicated to providing software designed to scale with businesses. Odoo's programs for manufacturing, accounting, and more aim to provide building blocks for creating a custom software suite. Odoo, what businesses need.
This final note on the way out, ticker symbol O of the day around here is WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery. The company has been challenged the past couple of years, you might say, since the Warner Brothers buyout by Discovery's David Zaslav. Anyway, WBD shares up almost 30% today after the Wall Street Journal reported that Paramount Skydance, also in the news of late, Skydance bought Paramount, and not for nothing, CBS News, you probably read about that. Anyway, the Journal says Skydance and its boss David Ellison, son of Oracle's Larry, turns out he now wants WBD. Mostly in cash, by the way, too. Our daily production team includes Andy Corbin, Nicholas Guillong, Maria Hollenhorst, Iru Ekpanobi, Sarah Leeson, Sean McHenry, and Sophia Terenzio. I'm Kai Rizdal. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is AP.
WNYC is supported by HSS, ranked the #1 hospital in the